We researched two international pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer and Teva, with Pfizer being the MNC and Teva being the ADR. I, Brittanie Wallace, researched Pfizer, and Justin DuBose researched Teva. Pfizer is headquartered in New York with research headquarters in Connecticut. They're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and they've been a component of the Dow Jones Index since 2004. They develop and produce medicines and vaccines in various medical fields. They also have some popular products which are listed here on this slide. On this slide, you can see a list of their currency exposures and their main facilities around the world. The currencies that they have exposure to are the Indonesian rupiah, South Korean won, Japanese yen, Indian rupee, Swedish krona, Chinese yuan, European euro, Canadian dollar, and the British pound. Their facilities are located in the United States, the United Kingdom, Belgium, China, Germany, India, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Puerto Rico, and Singapore. Each currency position shown on the slide were calculated by subtracting expenses from revenues. Because expenses exceed revenues, Pfizer has short positions in SEK, Euro, CNY, KRW, GBP, and Canadian dollar. Because revenues exceed expenses, they have a long position in US dollar, INR, IDR, and JPY. For example, Pfizer received 21.14 million euros in revenues, and they paid out 51.31 million euros to their suppliers. This left a net position of negative 30.17 million euros, leaving Pfizer with a short position in euros. The net position of each currency was converted into US dollars using the 2018 year-end indirect exchange rate. Net positions were converted to US dollars in order to reflect their true ranking of exposure. As shown on this slide, Pfizer's top 5 currency exposures are JPY, SEK, KRW, INR, and the Euro. We used historical daily stock prices and compared them to historical daily currency prices to track the similarities and differences in movement. As you can see in this correlation matrix, Pfizer is not heavily correlated to any of the currencies it's exposed to. This can be explained by some currencies' net position being very small relative to Pfizer's total revenues as well as hedging programs. Because of Pfizer's efficient hedging program, some of these correlations may be misleading and may not appear to support the position. Pfizer and the S&P 500's correlation of 0.6882 is significant, which is proven by this graph. This graph supports a positive correlation and shows similarities in movement. Pfizer hedges in multiple ways, one being denominating transactions in US dollars regardless of the home currency of the supplier or the customer. For example, Pfizer has 4 suppliers located in Japan, but they use US dollars to pay their expenses. This reduces their exposure to the Japanese yen as well as foreign exchange risk. They also manage same currencies between revenues and costs, as well as managing same currencies between assets and liabilities. Their hedging programs consist of financial instruments and foreign currency debt. Per Pfizer's 2018 10K, they primarily hedge exposures to the euro, the UK pound, the Japanese yen, the Swedish krona, and the Chinese RMB.
Moving on to the next pharmaceutical company, Teva is headquartered out of Israel. They trade on the TASE, which is located in Israel, and they also trade on the NYSE in the United States. Below is a list that states the currencies that Teva is exposed to, along with manufacturing facilities they have around the world. Teva is exposed to the United States dollar, the euro, the British pound, Japanese yen, Israeli shekel, Canadian dollar, Polish zloty, Argentinian peso, Turkish lira, and Russian ruble. They are located in North America, Europe, Latin America, Israel, Germany, Hungary, Croatia, Bulgaria, India, Spain, and the Czech Republic. I found that Teva's short positions are in Euro, GBP, ILS, Canadian dollar, PLN, and Russian ruble, and they have long positions in US dollar and JPY. They also have neutral positions with ARS and TRY. I used multiple different methods in order to find each currency's position since there was a lack of information on revenues and expenses in Bloomberg, as well as Teva's 10K only reporting revenues by geological region. Revenue and expense breakdown helped to find Euro, USD, and JPY positions. For the USD, Euro, and JPY, I used the percentage of revenue indicated in the 10K. I subtracted the total expenses for each currency's region and found that revenues still exceeded expenses. For the USD and JPY, this proved their long position. However, Teva had a substantial amount of debt in Euro, which caused a short position. This is also supported by Teva's correlation with the Euro, along with statements from the 10K and statements from Mr. Barger. For the remaining currencies, I used a mix of the following different methods: considering notes from the 10K, clues from the hedging program, correlations with the currencies, foreign currency denominated debt, and I also spoke with the senior manager of investor relationships for Teva, who is Mr. Barger. We used historical daily stock prices and compared them to historical daily currency prices to track the similarities and differences in movement between the two. It is expected that a long position would have a positive correlation and a short position would have a negative correlation. However, this may not always be true due to hedging and other variables. For Teva, all of the correlations support the position, although they are not statistically significant. The next three slides are Teva stock price correlations with different indices. Teva has a correlation of 0.3059 with the TA 125, which is the Israeli index. This makes sense because Teva has an operating presence in Israel because that's where their headquarters is located. Next, Teva has a correlation of 0.5113 with the S&P 500. Considering that 52% of Teva's revenue comes from the United States, this explains the correlation between Teva and the US market. Lastly, Teva has a correlation of 0.4646 with the Euronext 100. This correlation is justified the same way that the US correlation is justified because they have a 19% revenue, 19% of their total revenue comes from Euro, and they have a substantial operations that are conducted in Europe. This correlation is justified. When speaking to Mr. Barger, the senior manager of investor relationships for Teva, he stated that most of their positions are naturally hedged and they only enter into forward and options contracts in which they are not naturally hedged. This is a screenshot from the 10K showing their forward options, their option contracts between various currencies. This information helped determine positions of certain currencies. Our findings indicate that Phizer is successful in mitigating foreign exchange risk due to their natural hedging and hedging programs. I believe that the insignificant correlations between Phizer's stock price and the currencies it's exposed to supports this claim. This is also supported by Phizer's 10K, which states that they have a favorable impact of foreign exchange of $310 million, which is only 1%, which is less than 1% of their total revenue in 2018. We also found that Teva is not as successful at mitigating their risk through natural hedging and hedging programs because they are still subject to a fair amount of foreign exchange risk. This is shown through the 10K because Teva's equity was negatively impacted by $713 million due to foreign exchange risk.